Hello and welcome to the Groupthink Podcast. Joining us this week are two guests, one a returning guest and one a first time. The first being C.S. Johnson, who we haven't had on in almost a year at this point. And then additionally we have author and editor Faith Moore.
Hi everyone.
How's it going?
Thanks for having me.
It's taken a while to kind of get this whole thing set up because everyone here lives busy, productive lives, so... But yeah, I know you guys... Have you guys talked in a while? Because I know you guys are, like, besties outside of Twitter.
Oh, yeah. And I keep dropping the ball on calling you, but we text, like, every day. Almost.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep, so I got my son here, and he actually knows Miss Faith, so...
I can't see him, but...
Okay. So I called him Phobos and Deimos online.
I know, that's why I didn't say his name.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh.
Hi, son.
Sorry. Yes. I nicknamed them after the children of the god of war, and I thought it was terribly appropriate.
Well, they are adorable forces of chaos and destruction, so it's not...
Oh, yeah. Amen to that.
It's not completely off. It's just... It might... Maybe this is a therapy session later in life. Maybe...
I intend to give them good therapy session stories, if nothing else.
Oh, that's... I was gonna say that's the goal, but... I mean, that probably shouldn't be, so... I don't know. So yeah, I guess... CS, it's been a while since we've had you, but I'll let you do a quick kind of update, but we haven't had Faith on, so kind of... Could you give us a quick description of everything you do? Because you've kind of done a lot of things.
Okay, you can call me CJ, by the way. It's just easiest, and it doesn't sound weird like CS does. So I thought MJ was weird when Spider-Man came out, of course, and 20 years later, I still think it's kind of weird. But CJ's fine, and I am the empress of my own media empire. So I write a lot of books, and I have a lot of books and other things, and I tweet sometimes, which is always weird or amusing or something out there. So that's it. You can find me at csjohnson.me. Just .me.
You're kind of stepping on Faith's toes, but...
No, that's okay. It was your turn. Now it can be my turn now. That's okay. That's all good. So yeah, I'll introduce myself. I'm Faith Moore. I am the author of Saving Cinderella, What Feminists Get Wrong About Disney Princesses and How to Set It Right, which is a book all about the feminist misconceptions about Disney princesses. And each chapter is about one official Disney princess movie, going through chronologically and looking at the way that critics have kind of misinterpreted the movies and shifted Disney's perspective on princesses. I also, I'm a stay-at-home mom most of all, but I am also a freelance writer. I have written in many places. Currently, I contribute regularly to Evie magazine, but I've also been in the Wall Street Journal and the New York Daily News and the Federalist and other places like that. And I'm also a freelance editor, so I get to read people's work and tell them what they're doing wrong and hopefully help them. So so those are all of my many hats that I wear. And I also tweet, which is very fun and amusing. I'm at Faith K. Moore. That's my Twitter handle, but you can also find me at faithkmoore.com.
And without bearing the lead too seriously, she's also most famous for being Spencer's sister, so...
That's great. I love that instead of Andrew Clavin's daughter. I'm Spencer's sister. I appreciate that.
I'm sure he appreciates that too. He'll love that.
Yeah, that was
I'm sure he'd love the ego stroke. I want to have him on eventually too.
I'm sure you can.
I'm sure. But yeah, if we have any topic tonight, I guess I've been wanting to talk to Faith specifically about Frozen 2, because I know this is explicitly in her realm of expertise. And however much you want to do that, we can, but I also want to kind of keep the floor open to kind of do what we want, because I know you guys probably haven't seen each other in a while, so...
Oh, well, I don't want to brag, but I'm pretty needy, so Faith hears from me quite often.
You're not needy. You're awesome. Yeah, Frozen 2. It took me kind of a while. I meant to see it right when it came out, and then I got this sinus infection, and then I had surgery for a different reason, so I just never saw it until I did finally see it. So, yeah, so we can talk about whatever you want. What do you want to talk about?
Well, I was going to say we're going to be finally reviewing this Thanksgiving release after New Year's, so.
That's right. That's right. Well, now everybody's seen it, so we can give spoilers and stuff, as opposed to if we were doing it right then we would have to.
Yeah, I also want to say all the outrage reviews of it are up on YouTube, and I have been watching. I think I've gotten to that point where I almost like watching the YouTube reviews of this movie sucks or this movie's the greatest movie ever, and I like thinking through the thing. It's just the range of human emotion that a movie can prompt these days.
Well, usually it's like binary emotion. It's either this is the worst thing I've seen since 2 months ago, or alternatively, it's I can't believe they made a good movie in the current year.
Jeez, yeah, well, you're not allowed to have an opinion unless it's one or the other. No one's going to listen to you, right? You can't have a nuanced opinion. It has to be like this is trash or this is a masterpiece of cinema. You can't be one or the other.
But explains why I'm not getting paid that much yet, so.
You and me both.
So I guess the important question tonight is, did you like it, and is it horrific propaganda?
Yeah, this is a good question. I thought I was going to hate it because I actually hate the original. And I think that I was actually pleasantly surprised. I think in order to think about the movie Frozen 2, you kind of have to go back to Frozen 1 and think about what that was saying. And for me, it was this kind of horrible feminist manifesto all about how Prince Charming, the myth of Prince Charming is dead. We killed it, it's over, and now we're going to put in front of you a new version of true love, and we're going to say that it's love between sisters, or like familial love, basically, there's nothing wrong with familial love, obviously, and there's lots of great things to say about sisters and about parents and children, etc. But this specifically took away the romance and replaced it with the sister, and that doesn't make any sense. That's kind of icky, right? And it had this stupid gotcha of like, he looks like the perfect Prince Charming, but really he's a murderous psychopath. So and I felt like, that wasn't the right, not only was that not the right message, but saying that, gotcha, it's not true love between two adult people, it's true love between your sister, who has always been with you since your childhood, is basically saying, don't grow up. And growing up is what a Disney princess is supposed to do. She's supposed to go from child to adult. So it just kind of corrupted that message in a way that I really didn't like. But Frozen 2, crazily and strangely, goes back on all of that. And I don't actually think that the filmmakers necessarily know that they did this, but to me, it completely reversed that, because it has the sisters basically realizing that in order for them to live their own independent lives, they have to separate from each other. That Anna has to cleave herself and marry him and make a life together. And if Elsa is part of that life, then no, she's the third wheel. That's weird. And so Elsa has to go and find out what she's supposed to do and who she's supposed to be. And she does that. And it's basically like, we can still love each other even though we're not together anymore, which is basically the lesson a Disney princess has to learn. You can love your family, but you have to separate from them. So I was actually pleasantly surprised, weird politics of the movie aside. So that's my review in a nutshell.
That's an interesting observation that the first Frozen was kind of allergic to the idea of growing up, because I noticed that with the live action, of all things, the live action Christopher Robin movie a couple years ago, which I'm assuming you've seen that?
I have.
That movie?
The live action Christopher Robin, I can't remember. Did I see that?
It was
no, I saw the one about the actual Christopher Robin. I didn't see the one with Winnie the Pooh in it.
Yeah, I mean, that movie kind of bugged me with its unwillingness to actually kind of wrestle with the plot that it seemed to be setting up, because obviously it's about an adult Christopher Robin who suddenly comes into contact with a perfectly formed Winnie the Pooh that, by all accounts, should not exist because it's in the realm of his imagination. So I'm sitting here thinking, okay, this is a story about him coming into contact with his childhood one day, and it's gonna have to end with him either passing it on to his daughter or putting it away forever and learning to be a proper adult and handling it. But spoilers, but no, he just learns that he needs to embrace his childhood and stay in his childhood as an adult. I'm sitting here like, is this?
See, I didn't think that from the movie at all. I actually thought they did a really good job with it.
It's a great movie. I think it's. I'm just saying. I think that the subtext is a little wonky in terms of what it says about maturity.
Well, I thought it was actually more about nostalgia, because we just got hit with like 3 Star Wars movies that I think, if you want to talk about outrage reviews on the internet, I've had great fun with that one too. But it was talking about like passing it on and like to your family part of you, and how you work through the juxtaposition of real life and the past and the present, moving on towards the future.
I think that's what it's trying to say, but I don't think it really commits by the end, because by the end he's now living with Christopher. He's now permanently living with the Pooh, and the Pooh is hanging out with his kids, and I don't see the thing he's growing beyond in that final scene necessarily.
Well, I think it's growing like there's not just growing up, but there's also growing out, and I thought maybe that was like kind of more of an option for people. It's kind of like my kids and BB-8. Like I haven't shown them any Star Wars movies, and they know who BB-8 is. And it's just kind of weird, but it's just there. So
I think there's like a genre of movie. I'm thinking also of the movie Hook, which is obviously a long time ago from the 90s with Robin Williams and Dustin Hoffman. There's a kind of movie that this Christopher Robin one sounds like. I haven't seen that one, but it sounds like is that this concept that when we grow up, we lose the magic of our childhood, and that is something worth holding on to. And kind of like you were saying about nostalgia, that there is something about our childhood that we do need to hold on to in order to live a full and complete life as an adult, but we also have to separate from our childhood because we can't go around talking to stuffed animals. That would be insane. So we have to somehow, these things have to somehow live inside of us, so in Hook, for example, he actually is Peter Pan, but he's chosen to grow up and he's forgotten. So that part of him that's full of childlike wonder has gone away, and he needs to remember that. And I think that there's a way that is true in our lives, and right, we pass that on to our children. But I think the problem with these movies like the original Frozen and some of the later princess movies is that in taking the princess away from the journey outward, away from family and towards her new family with her potential spouse, it negates the idea that you do have to separate and break away. And it's poignant and sad. That's why nostalgia feels sad to us. We could sort of sit around and be like, wasn't it great? We're so happy that we had this childhood, and wasn't it great when we played with Winnie the Pooh? Except we know that we've lost something. We know we've lost something when we move away from our childhood into our adulthood, and it is sad. And so it's that balance between remembering what it was like to be a child and to sort of understand the magic of childhood, and now to be an adult and never be able to go back, really. So it's kind of like holding on to those two things. I kind of think those movies, like the Christopher Robin one and Hook, are sort of a different genre of movie that is saying something different about childhood than these other movies that are coming of age stories.
I don't disagree with any of your points. I just feel like we're seeing a lot of movies about the reconnection of your childhood and the reestablishing of it coming from a company that stands to benefit enormously from people that are very deeply in touch with their childhood, for better or worse. And in a long-term societal effect, I can see that there are too many people that complain about the infantilization of culture, but I definitely just think there's kind of a weird unwillingness to kind of wrestle with what it means to be an adult in contrast with what it means to be in touch with your childhood. At least that's my only problem with it. They're fine movies for what they are, so it's just that lack of distinction that kind of bothers me.
I don't blame you for that. I don't think a lot of people part of the reason I think that they have those is not just because they're cash cows and you can milk them to death, but because people today, I don't think I honestly don't think people know how to grow up very well today. And Frozen actually kind of plays into that for me, because the thing that, like what Faith was saying about how they replaced it, is my big problem with like that sort of setup for it is that a lot of Disney princesses before, like settled families, if that makes sense. This is the first one in a while. I mean, like, I know all the parents die and stuff, but it's like the family is the first kind of place where you get your identity as a person. And Elsa, like, I mean, like, the whole reason that I think Frozen 2 kind of works better for her is because she had, like, a negative arc where she had to go back and get her family, and that meant Anna. And then in this one, she had to go back and forgive the rest of her family. And she's finally figured out she's been able to embrace who she is because she knows everything. And they've gone through the cycle of, you know, the mother and the quest for the mother. And the quest for the mother ultimately ends up being the quest for yourself as a woman, you know.
Right.
Yeah, so there you go. That's the gist of my review.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. And I think one thing that's interesting is if they had said, okay, we're putting out Frozen 1, and this is part 1 of a 2-part story, I would have felt better about the reconciliation of the sisters as the fulfillment of part 1, because then it's sort of like, okay, now they've come together as sisters. Their family was very fractured because of her powers and the way that the parents chose to deal with the powers. Now the sisters have come together and they're united, and then part 2 is how they're going to grow up. You know, they had to get to part 1 before they could do that journey of growing up. But that wasn't it. They didn't know there was going to be a 2. They didn't even know it was going to be as popular as it was, or as such a phenomenon. So they were really telling a story, plus the addition of the ridiculous Hans narrative of, you know, Bata, Prince Charming wants to kill everyone, tells me that it really was this story of trying to replace true love, like romantic love, with familial love, which is not a replacement. Those two things are both important, but you don't replace one with the other. You don't say, like, I'm not going to get married, I'll just live with my sister. Those aren't the same thing. So that idea would have worked a lot better for me if we knew that the arc was not complete at the end of Frozen 1, and if we had gotten rid of the whole Han storyline, I would have felt better about it. But, you know, I still think that they weren't playing fair in the first one, and I don't really know. I have a lot of questions about what went into the creation of the second one, because they also do a lot of stuff like Olaf says a lot of things. For example, forests are places of transformation, which is just true about fairy tales. They say a lot of things about, like, fairy tale symbolism that it's almost like they learned about in the interim. Like, in the 6 years between the 2 movies, they figured out that fairy tales are a thing and that they're full of symbols. And I don't know what that's about. I really want to know kind of what went into the process of making Frozen 2, because they really seem to have kind of done an about face, which is strange to me.
Well, Disney in recent years, I think Olaf was kind of like the meta commentary on a lot of things. Mm-hmm. And like, he's not really like that in the first movie. Not anything grand that I can remember. Just right. Like, I mean, he's more of a foreshadowing device, if anything, the first one, with, you know, he just wanted to know what heat felt like and stuff. You yearn for your own destruction. Got it. Right. So, like in Frozen 2, I felt like, oh, well, you know, we can't have senior psychopath over here anymore, so let's just give him, like, let's give the meta commentary on society and culture to Olaf. It's like, okay.
His character was interesting, I felt like, in the second one, because the conceit was that now he is growing up, so he kind of, you know, there's the whole gag is like, oh, you know, when I am as old as you, I'll understand everything. You know, all of this weird stuff will make sense, where it's like, no, it doesn't make sense, because the world doesn't make sense. But he, and so, yeah, he kind of is telling us what we're supposed to be getting out of all of this a lot of the time. But a big part of Anna's transformation has to do with the loss of Olaf. And I think that Olaf is really about childhood. That his whole shtick is that he's kind of a child, but he's growing up, and that's really what's happening to Anna and to Elsa too in the story. And when Anna feels like she's lost both Elsa and Olaf, that's really the moment when she discovers that she is actually an independent being, that she and her sister are not merged as one human being. She is her own human being. And that is also what Elsa has gone off to learn at the same moment. And they emerge having, they go in as two sisters and, almost as like merged as one person, and they come out as two different people. And that's kind of the point of this story, which is amazing given the message of the first movie, which is basically they're the same. They're merged and they have to be together all the time. So I don't know why they did that, but I'm a fan.
Yeah, I will say in Facebook she talks about something so similarities between like Merida's journey and Pocahontas's journey. I actually call these negative arcs, because you end up with your family, and I think it's almost like you have to reaffirm the foundation with it. So I see Frozen as more of like, oh, we have to go back and get what we lost with our family thing and secrets and lies and all this other stuff, and kind of firm it up. And then from that level, it's like almost like the next level of a pyramid. And actually I thought about this in terms of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So I was like, yeah, so it's like Elsa's kind of avatar / what was it, like superhero, super princess moment. That was kind of like self-actualization for me, like that was the level that she was talking about. This is like herself, because in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it's like the first thing, there's like, you need food, you need shelter, you need to be able to poop, you need some sense of security, and you need water, and then on top of that, you have family love and identity, security, and everything. So she had to go back and get that level, and then once she and Anna were together, that kind of gave her that level to where she could get to the top layer of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which is self-actualization. And considering like they talk a lot about how and I even said this before with Elsa, like she's more or less depressed and mentally insecure for lack of a better term. And I would also apply this to my own self at times in my life, so I'm not being insulting or anything, or I would insult myself in the process, which I'm also fine with doing. Come to think of it, maybe I should just forget that caveat. But so the correlation between the psychological and the kind of like negative arc, like I was saying, where she has to go back and get her family, and then she can push on to something herself, into like that was uniquely herself too. So that made sense to me. I like these movies together. I'm less excited about them apart. So the second one wouldn't have made sense without the first one, and the first one was just kind of like it's not. I mean, it's got its great moments, but it's also got its really bad moments. And this one kind of like leveled everything out.
It doesn't help that there was 6 years between them.
Well, I guess that's time for turnover.
I also find that it actually was the same creative team, like the same creators, the same songwriters and everything, because it's so different, the second movie. And its message is almost the reverse of the original. So I went online to look, like, did somebody else join the team? Like, what's going on here? But no, it's the same people. And I don't know. I do know that they didn't have this second story in mind when they did the first one. So it is all very strange to me how this all unfolded. But I'm glad that it did, because I think it speaks to the possibility, at least, of Disney kind of recalibrating itself back towards the idea of moving away from the nuclear family and out on one's own, and potentially even finding, a romantic partner. I think it's sort of like Anna finds. I say in my book, Anna is sort of the more traditional Disney princess, and in the original one, she's mocked for that. She's mocked for being a sort of traditional, or what they see as the traditional Disney princess. But in the second one, there was a moment, when Kristoff spends the entire movie wanting to propose to her, but then things keep happening. And finally he does, and spoiler alert, she says yes. And there was this moment where I thought, oh no, is she going to say no? Is that what this is about? Is she going to say, no, we can't get married? But she did, and she was really excited and happy about it. And I thought, like, yeah, that's right. You know, that's her life. Her job is to now marry him and have a family with him and be who she's meant to be. And Elsa's job is to, I don't know what her job is, but go off and discover her magical powers. And eventually, hopefully, she will find someone to spend her life with, whoever that is. So I really thought it was a really positive development that was unexpected.
There you go.
They're trying to get both.
Right.
How bad are you guys cutting off on the? Because I'm like jumping in and out.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
It's okay. I just want to make sure we aren't going to like lose the chat like halfway through this.
Guess we'll have to cross that bridge when we come to it.
Well, there you go. If I suddenly get kicked out of my own chat, send me back an invite to get back in.
Okay.
I will say, like the stuff I didn't like about it, I honestly liked the movie's kind of erratic, like the first movie's kind of more erratic musical qualities. Like you always have some good, some bad, some weird, some off songs. And this one, it felt so coordinated that I was almost bored by it.
Yeah, I was not a fan of the songs in this one, and everybody was raving about like Christoph's 80s dance number. It was ready, and it's like
I loved that I took my husband with me to see it, because I even looked at him and I was like, when you wanted to marry me, is that kind of how you felt? And he was like, no.
Yeah, and what's funny too is everyone's raving about Into the Unknown as like, oh, it's the new Let It Go, but I actually thought that was a very blah song. Like it didn't do anything for me. I liked the one. Elsa has two songs in this. The other one is at the end, Show Yourself, which I thought was better, at least, than Into the Unknown. And I don't know why that one is not the ballad that we're all singing, but
no, it's so much better than Into the Unknown.
It's so much better. And it has a really sweet lullaby in it, which I like. I was singing that yesterday, that the mother sings to the two daughters, which I thought is kind of pretty. But yeah, the first one, I felt like the songs were really dynamic. And even though I completely hate the message of Let It Go and think it's ridiculous, it clearly is. It is something. It's a musical masterwork, if only because it gets stuck in your head and everybody's singing it. So, I think, I thought the songs were sort of a step down. And obviously the movie has a lot of weird politics going on in it, which I sort of just write off. Like there's a whole not subplot, but there's a whole plot about needing to make amends for the something. So I think I just kind of write that off. A lot of people are upset about it because they think it's trying to say something about reparations, but even if it is, I don't know what it's trying to say. So I just sort of don't care about that. So
I was actually pleasantly surprised that I didn't recognize the politics.
Yeah, I mean, they were so dumb as to just be like non-existent.
And the first one didn't really have a lot of politics either. I think it was more about. Well, I would say it's more about feminism and cultural feminism in the first one, and then the second one, I honestly thought it was like, and this is probably one of the problems I have with the film, is that they, it's very nice that, like, Elsa has her moment of self-actualization, but it's like, does she have to be a superhero?
It was a little weird. Was she a superhero? Was she, like, a magic spirit? Like, I didn't understand, like, is she not, in fact, human? Like, I didn't understand what she became at the end. It was kind of weird.
And there's so many things I could say about it, and I could probably drone on for a long time about it, because I like the quest for the mother. It's one of my favorite things, because I have this seated fear that I'm somehow a horrible mother to my children. And if they go looking for me, they're going to go looking for me to kill me, more or less. But I just felt like that was kind of like, I mean, like the Fifth Element, really. Why is that not an internet meme right now?
I know. Dallas, don't pass, Elsa.
This is what I was looking for.
Exactly. I know. Yeah, it was. So she was the Fifth Element. I know, it's very strange. So, but like she's a fifth element, so she's like a magical spirit being, except she can come over for charades on Friday night, so it's fine. It was that was a little strange, but clearly there's going to be Frozen 3, so we're going to have to.
Yeah, I honestly, I'm like, talk about binary stuff, like with responses. I almost, like, I dread it because they'll probably bring back Hans. And then the other half of me is like, oh, I kind of want to see what they do with it, but it's like, I don't want to see what they do with it either. So, because I don't hate the movie, and I like there are moments I like and stuff, but they're like overall it was just kind of like blah, or blah blah. We can sing it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, I agree. I actually agree with that. I mean, I was pleasantly surprised by the movie's message, but it wasn't like a great movie as a movie. And I think, clearly Frozen, the first one, was such an amazing success and a cultural phenomenon, an enormous cash cow, that there was going to be a sequel, and now I'm sure there's going to be a third one. But I do think that they're just kind of trying to make money at this point. They know which things resonate with audiences. They know that there has to be another Elsa transformation, like physical transformation number. There has to be more Olaf. They know it's sort of a calibrated machine, and that takes away from the storytelling and the quality of the movie, because it's just kind of like, what elements do we need to have in here so that people will pay us lots and lots and lots of money? It was actually an interesting point, this sort of a broader point, because everybody's always talking about how, Disney's bottom line is that they're trying to make money, and that's true, and they're a company and they should be trying to make money. But a lot of time, one of the ways that I know that they're driven a lot of the time by a political agenda or a cultural agenda as opposed to the bottom line is that they frequently make choices that have to do with politics and culture that lose them money. And so, it's kind of this balancing act, because they clearly are dealing with the cultural influences that they hear, that they think they're hearing from this. I call them the princess critics, but this sort of vocal minority of people who are trying to influence them. They're trying to balance that with the money, which actually comes from the more traditional movies. When you take a movie like Tangled, which is as traditional as they come, that makes tons and tons of money, versus a movie like Pocahontas, which makes way, way less money. But they go for it anyway with these kind of PC feminist movies, because they're trying to walk that line. I think it's really interesting, and I don't know where we're going. I don't know what's going to happen.
They're going to keep following what they perceive as the bottom line, because obviously I think something like the themes you get in a Frozen isn't necessarily them propagating an idea as so much as they think it's where they're going to hear the least amount of criticism doing that, just because I would assume it just has to do with politically correct critics are going to be a lot louder than regular people complaining about the things that they don't like in those movies. So they're just going to go with, okay, who's going to cause us the most damage by screaming the most? And in this case, it's going to be the academics and the cultural critics and stuff like that who are politically correct and politically of the left, and they're gonna, if you make them happy and you mildly cheese off the rest of the populace, you're probably still gonna get the vast range of people that just want to go see a Disney movie either way. So you get the benefits of at least two of those things, and then you lose out on the people that really don't want to go see a politically correct film.
I honestly think Disney's feeling the heat from both ends right now, because I think Rise of Skywalker is like proof of that. They tried to retcon a lot of the Last Jedi, and so you do see, like, I saw a lot more safety. Like, I actually went to see Solo, and I know that was like one of their big things that was like, we're not going to make our money back on this type of thing. And it was a very kind of paint-by-numbers sort of heist intrigue film that did some weird stuff. I mean, just that like only like super hardcore fans would get, like bringing back Darth Maul, and I love I think honestly, like Disney can pay off a lot of the critics, if that makes sense, in certain ways. The casting couch thing, even though the Me Too movement has kind of clamped down on it, it's only going to evolve, with change. And that's the, that's the problem with, like, cutting off one of Hydra's heads, right? Is, like, it comes back in different ways, or in more kind of visceral ways. So,
yeah.
Especially since they have basically a monopoly. I mean, like this last year, they have over 50% of the gross box office market, and now they're going through kind of like they're trying to, like, you can kind of see them trying to woo back their fans with good faith show stuff, and it's just kind of weird. So it's weird.
Yeah, it's really interesting to me because I think it is true that the people who are shouting about all this politically correct stuff, who are angry about the old movies and how un-PC they were, and are trying to force there to be more politically correct imaging and storytelling, are the critics and the people who are, have the microphone, in a sense, because they can write reviews online and in magazines and newspapers, and they have their podcasts and their YouTube shows and everything. And so, this is a point I make in my book. It looks like that's the majority view, is that it looks like the majority wants to see more feminist princesses, for example, and less kind of fairy tale romance, for example. But we know that that's not true. We know that the fans actually don't want that, because when they make a more traditional film, it makes more money. So they're actually not necessarily catering to the financial bottom line when they cater to these critics. So but what's happening is they're hiring people who agree with these critics. So then the movies get pushed further and further towards the PC side. And Disney, I think, is trying to walk the tightrope of the movies that make money and the movies that believe in the philosophy that they have adopted. And it's tricky for them. And you watch them do these ridiculous things, like, they make the live action movies. And to me, the live action remakes of the animated classics are basically just them saying, like, okay, the fans complained about this, and this. We're going to answer those questions in this movie. That's all they are. If you look at, Beauty and the Beast, the live action Beauty and the Beast, they made this whole thing about, she's the feminist belle, but she wasn't. It was like, are all the objects enchanted? How long has it been since it was just these sort of fan questions that didn't make sense in the original movie, because, but who cares, because it's a cartoon. They're answering these things. They're constantly trying to appease the fans, appease the critics, push their agenda, which they actually have, and the big mishmash that I think currently is turning out a bunch of garbage. The fans have spoken, basically, which is that they want the more traditional stuff, but now Disney is populated by PC feminist people, so they're stuck, I think, and I don't know what's going to happen.
Well, and going back to Frozen 2, it's the same creative team. I think they grew up a little bit too, if that makes sense. It's statistically proven that if you have kids, you're more conservative, or to some degree anyway, because you recognize, if I'm going to take care of these kids, I need a job and I need security, and maybe I can't go out with Antifa tonight because they've got school in the morning. So it's true. You don't want to get arrested for rioting, and I have to spend lunch money on bail money now. It's
I really like the idea of the Antifa mom. Sorry, I can't come. I have to go to my weird rally.
I'm in jail, son. I can't make lunch for you, so you're gonna have to pull a bag of dog food. I'm sorry.
Right, exactly.
Let me pack lunches for all all the writers, all my readers, friends. Yeah, so I mean, like, it's so, I mean, like, I know Kristen Bell actually, like, didn't she have her baby, like, right as they were working, after they were finished Frozen 1, and now they're...
I think she was pregnant during the
recording. And her kid's a little bit older, and I will say, like, you want to be able to tell your kids, like, nuance. Like, I have my kids in karate, and I have to be able to tell them, you know, now, you're not learning this, you can go people up. You're learning it so if somebody hits you, you could hit them back hard, and then go tell your teacher and run away.
Right. Yeah.
So there are some things where it's like, did you really instigate that fight? Because I really... that sounds like something you would do if you were, even if you weren't provoked in some cases. But it's still better to, like, teach them, you know. But there's so, and like my daughter, you know, she's my little princess. It's like, one day you're gonna find your Prince Charming, and she wants to be a mom, and she has her baby dolls and stuff. It's cute, and I have to, my husband and I have a really good marriage and stuff, so it's easy for me to say that. But I know, like, with the divorce rate and everything else, I'm sure a lot of people actually liked Hans being a psychopath, because it was, a lot of people have run into those things. I mean, I make a joke that I have a lot of divorced mom friends. I feel bad for making that joke, but it's true. I see a lot of it, and so do they, and I can only put a good face on and say, it'll be different for you. It's different for us. It's different. It'll be different for you. And, soulmate doesn't mean, well, I don't think soulmate's a really good romantic term anyway. I wouldn't qualify it as that, but it's like your Prince Charming would be your own Prince Charming, and you have a right to that journey and that adventure and the ups and downs and how much you're going to be able to withstand along with it. So that's like nuance right there. General thing is you're going to find your Prince Charming, and and the nuance is there are going to be good times, there are going to be bad times. It's the Charles Dickens thing, the Walt Disney thing. So I forget where I was going with this.
No, but
brain talking now.
Well, you're making me think about, a lot of the critique of princess movies, or even some of the other Disney movies, is, they're not sending good messages to little girls when they show these princesses falling in love at first sight and riding off into the sunset with a guy that, if this was happening in real life, they just they met 2 seconds ago and they don't even know him. I mean, we don't want our daughters meeting somebody and getting on their horse or into their car and driving away and getting married the next day. We don't want that. That's not good advice. So, parents are kind of like, we don't want to show these movies to our daughters because look at what happens. Cinderella meets this guy at the ball, and 2 seconds later they're getting married. Similarly, same with Snow White, and he, oh my gosh, and he kisses her, she's asleep, and she wakes up, and there he is, and they ride off to their castle in the sky. Why is it in the sky? We don't know. But I think what's missing, and this is kind of one of my big points, is that meeting of two souls that happens in that fairy tale love at first sight situation is a symbolic representation of something that really does happen in real life, which is that when you meet someone and you get to know them and you spend a lot of time together, you come to know them soul to soul, and you see who they are on the inside, and they see who you are on the inside, and you fall in love, and you decide to make a life together. And in real life, it doesn't happen like that. That's fine, but in a fairy tale it does, and because it's not real life, it's a fairy tale, and it's symbolic. So if we can learn to read these fairy tales and these movies based on fairy tales the way they were meant to be read, then they do promote an idea that we do want to teach our children, which is that you should marry the guy who sees into your soul and into whose soul you also see. And that's what that love at first sight connection is representing. You shouldn't just marry someone because you think they're hot, or you shouldn't just sleep with someone because you have sexual desire for them. You need to wait for the person who sparks your soul in that way. And that's what those things are representing. And if we can't understand them and read them as that, then we think of them in this really superficial way, and we move our stories away from that idea, which actually does our children a disservice, I think. So I think that's part of the problem now with these movies, is that the people making them don't actually understand the original intent of the stories that they're based on.
Yeah, and I will add to that, like, the funny part is the people writing these things, I think, there's a difference between innocent faith and virtuous faith. And like most of these movies, in symbolism kind of way, they're giving you the innocent version, of like, this is the basics, the distilled elements of the story, kind of like the wisdom of the story.
Right.
And like with virtuous faith, it's also like what I would call like redeemed idealism to an extent. End of it is because that's kind of like the journey from innocence to disillusionment to redeemed faith, virtuous faith. And I think it's difficult for me to say it's like earlier we said, like, people don't know how to grow up today. And it's like, I feel like they need movies to tell them what to do to a certain extent. It's like, oh, you should do the right thing. Oh, it means you suffer? Oh, well, maybe not. And I think that's where I do think that is where a lot of confusion is. But I do think, too, like, one of the things that I first thought when I walked out was, like, Narnia did this so much better. And then, like, if you look at Frozen and Frozen 2, and then you look at The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and you look at Prince Caspian, and you see Edmund's arc, it's actually kind of similar in this aspect to me as Elsa's, where you kind of have this moment of misjudgment, and then you have a reckoning and a price to pay, and then you like in between the movies you reaffirm the foundation, and then from the second movie you're able to stand up righteously on like in an upright manner. And so that's kind of what I thought. I was like, oh, my son will like this and my daughter will like this. So I thought Narnia actually did it better, but I thought about it, and I just like the hero's journey better than Elsa's journey. I thought the thing about the other things I didn't like was like Faith tells it, the princess journey. You have that kind of arc, and then you have the hero's journey, which is more traditional. I felt this was too much of a hero's journey sort of thing. I liked that they tied it in with the quest for the mother, and they kind of did a mirror image of the quest for the father that you find in the hero's journey. But I also was like, this yeah.
Again, in this movie, I think this about the original Frozen, and in this one, the movie makes us think that it's really about Elsa's transformation. So in the original, we think it's all about Elsa learning that she needs to use her love for her sister to control her powers or whatever. But really, that movie is about Anna's quest to fight for her sister, and it's also about, which this is a part I don't like, but it's also about her getting over her naivete and realizing that fairy tale romance doesn't exist and that she needs to give up her life for her sister. But the second movie is even more Anna's story, I think. And it pretends to be about Elsa trying to discover that she's the fifth element and figure out, that she needs to separate from her sister. But actually, Elsa starts the movie ambivalent because she wants to stay with this kind of happy family situation that has evolved. But pretty early on, she realizes, no, she's got to go out there and she's got to figure out what this voice is that's calling her. She has to go into the unknown, and she has to find the river and blah 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 and find her destiny or whatever. And it's actually Anna that has a lesson to learn. It's Anna that keeps saying, no, we're sisters, we're supposed to stay together, we're supposed to stick together, we're not supposed to separate. And Elsa actually has to literally kick her down a mountain into a canoe in order to get her away, to separate. It's Elsa already knows that she needs to separate from Anna and do her own thing. It's Anna that needs to learn this, and she learns it in a really interesting way, which is that she believes that Elsa is dead. Then Olaf just sort of disappears in front of her, and he's gone, and she's all alone. And the lesson that she learns is, wow, this person, this sister that I thought was actually a part of my being, is gone, and I'm still here. I am a complete and whole human being, all by myself, without her, even though I'm grieving and I'm sad and this is horrible and I wish I could have her back, but I'm still me. And that's the lesson that she learns, and she comes out of there and makes some decisions and whatever, and then it turns out obviously that Elsa's fine, but which is great, hooray. But it's really her that is going on a journey in this movie, kind of like in the first movie, but more so, which I think is really interesting, that Elsa is the character that has captured everybody's imagination, but in both movies it's really about Anna.
Oh, well, yeah, I just like Elsa's story better, I guess.
Darker, she's got more angst, I think, and I think that appeals to people.
Yeah, I like how quiet she is. I think that might have something to do with me having children. They're arguing right now. I had to mute myself to yell at them, so it's like, so, yeah, you can hear my son. Oh, I'm so scared. Mommy's upset. Oh, well, I have one last thing I want to talk about with symbolism, because I thought this was too good to be coincidental. So Elsa's like the fifth element or whatever, and so I actually thought, so C.S. Lewis has this really popular book, The Four Loves, and I thought it was really interesting how well the elemental kind of connections to each of the different loves that he talks about in the book. So you have the I can't, and Spencer will probably hang me for my Greek, but the agape love of God, and then you have kind of like the eros for the like the sexual love and the passion, and then it's strega. I want to say stronger. Yeah, that's the one I can't say. And then there's the phileo, like deep friendship love. And I thought it was really interesting how, like, kind of in the center of all these things is where you belong, like Elsa belonged as the stepping point. And like I said, I walked out of there, I was like, that's too good just to be a coincidence. But I mean, it had to be like I don't think it was intentional either, so like, yep, God wanted to say something there. So.
Yeah, it did read like the filmmakers had done a lot of reading in the intervening years. It felt like they had done a lot of kind of thinking about story and fairy tales, and the first one felt like a reaction to the princess movies. They thought they were being sort of edgy and avant-garde and kind of creating this new, we're going to have these princesses that don't need a man, or that we're going to have this big gotcha about Prince Charming, and the naive princess is going to learn that she doesn't have to be so naive, and that. But this one really felt like somebody had sort of picked up a book about fairy tales and symbolism, and and I don't. Maybe that's true. Maybe that really happened. I have no idea.
Yep. Oh well, I like at the end, like there's no scene where like Elsa ever really tames the stone giants until the end, and that's when he and Anna are able to do it. And I thought that was like a good representation of like the family love, and then the eros. And I gotta say, I hate fan fiction, internet type stuff, but I know like there's all this like gay coding and stuff with Elsa's character, and like somebody that like has had depression pretty bad and found kind of like that identity. I was like, I don't think it would be really good for Disney to make her like mentally ill, like with depression and lesbian. So I just don't buy it. And like I thought it was like with the salamander, I thought it was actually pretty cool because like she just kind of like like throws a bunch of sand at her, or snow at her. Like, let's go ahead and extinguish that. And then with the wind, they kind of had this the wind sometimes like can symbolize God's voice, or the voice of God. Right. So I was like, oh, that's pretty, and so it's a lot of symbolism kind of that was there that I just thought was, oh, this is so good. This is so good. I don't think they wrote it that way.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting that, because there was that whole like hashtag give Elsa a girlfriend thing that happened after the first movie, when they realized that she doesn't end up with a love interest, so maybe she could be a lesbian. And I think this movie, interestingly, sort of makes her almost asexual. It's like she turns into a sort of forest sprite, and she doesn't seem to have that. And I don't know if that's sort of the next step for her, is what, her growing up journey is that she's now her own individualized person, self-actualized person, and now she's going to find love. I don't know. I mean, it's funny because I honestly would rather that she was a lesbian than that she finds no love at all. I mean, I think my reaction to this is always like, well, is she a lesbian? Like, she should have a girlfriend if she's a lesbian. She shouldn't have a girlfriend just because, like she shouldn't have a girlfriend because you want her to have a girlfriend, because wouldn't that be so edgy? She should have one if she is in fact a lesbian. So I don't know what's going to happen, but I do want to. I mean, now she basically lives alone on an island.
Yep,
with a bunch of people she doesn't know. Like, I would like her to find some kind of way of starting a new family of her own somehow. So I don't know what that will mean for her. But Frozen 3, right?
And that's something that I think that would be difficult. Like, I think like the journey, like, I like the stories that we, like the story elements to things, because it's like, I used to be a feminist, and I just don't think that feminism and like familyism coexist very well, and I think it would be difficult for her to find love. I think it would be very hard for her to find like a man. I know there's like it would be easier, I think, for her to end up with, a lesbian relationship, just because it would be very hard for like, I just think it would be very hard to find a man that she would feel like equal levels of worthy of, to be that powerful. I almost think it would be easier just to give her the girlfriend, because like, what are they gonna do? Find another spirit dude? I mean, like, oh, I'm like I'm honestly like sitting here and thinking, I just don't see how they would play it in a realistic way, and I think it's going to make a lot of conservatives mad.
Yeah, I mean, it's a problem, because for all of the feminists kind of like, well, she doesn't need a man. It's like, okay, but everybody needs love. Everybody needs love, and everybody needs to find a way of being that is separate from their family of origin. And the way that most people do that is to find a romantic partner and to start a new family. And, it isn't that. I think the mistake that feminists make is like, your life doesn't have meaning or purpose until you found a man to share it with. And that's obviously not true. Your life can be very meaningful. If you never find a man or a woman to share your life with, that's completely fine. It's that we all need to feel that sense of, like I was talking about before, that like someone else's soul recognizes my soul and my soul recognizes theirs, that we need to find that connection. And that usually happens romantically for people. That's just how we are. We're human beings. That's how it works. So, I think leaving her there with no love interest at all doesn't really complete her story for me. So,
and maybe that's where more of like the agape kind of thing would step in, because like nature would be kind of like her soulmate at this point. too.
Right, well, I wondered if they were sort of trying to say she was like above human, that she wasn't really a human being, and therefore did not have the same kind of drives and desires as humans. So we can leave her like this because she doesn't conform to those sort of human ideas, which is kind of like, okay, fine, that's fine.
Yeah. It takes a lot of like possibility for criticism away, because it's like,
right.
It's not a matter of you can't have your cake and eat it too. It's just you're not going to have cake.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that Disney, I think the people that work at Disney, like the creative team at Disney, would think it was great to give her a girlfriend. They all agree with that thinking. But I think that the people who are in charge of the money worry that there would be a big backlash, because I know there are a lot of people that wouldn't feel like that was an appropriate thing to show to their children. And that would be a conflict, I think, from within and without.
The great money versus the goodwill.
Right, exactly. So I think they're sort of copping out there by sort of saying, no, she doesn't need anybody because she's like a earth spirit. She's a spirit person, and so I don't know.
Yeah, like I said, this is part of the reason why I'm just kind of like, I've seen some of the fan fiction that people have written, and I'm just like, no. Like I was joking about the Fifth Element earlier. Okay. Bruce Willis shows up in some of them. It's just funny.
I was really, isn't there that? Because I was really thinking like, oh my gosh, she's the Fifth Element.
Oh my god, yes. Lilu's granddaughter, something incarnate. So, Tyler, make this a mate for me.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so overall, though, I didn't hate it. I didn't love it. It didn't have the heights of the first one, but it didn't have necessarily the lows. And I think, honestly, I think they could fix the whole thing if they just, instead of making Hans a psychopath, just the kiss didn't work. I mean, how hard would it have been for that, And, maybe instead of him trying to kill Elsa, Anna would have saved her from something else,
Yeah, no, I wanted it to be that when Elsa is off with Kristoff, when Anna is off with Kristoff doing whatever, Elsa gets to know Hans and they get together. Like, I wanted him to be a good guy, like he pretended to be, but just not the right person for Anna.
And that was also another possibility, and I think that would have been better. I have a son and a daughter, so it's like I grew up with a strained relationship with my father, so I understand that lack, but I also don't blame other people for it, and so I think that's probably and definitely my husband has he is the redeemer of a lot of my pain with that, he's been so good to me that all the pain before isn't forgotten, it's redeemed, it's better, and it's better because of all these things. It's very nice. And I just I don't like this idea that all these people who want to marry you are psychopaths or sociopaths in disguise. So again, it's I want to give my kids good stories for therapy, but I'm not actually a psychopath.
Yeah, I mean, I think what I thought, a lot of people had criticized the Kristoff-Anna relationship in Frozen 2 because Kristoff kind of just ends up on the sideline while Anna does all this stuff, and then he sort of shows up at the end when she needs him, and he kind of said hey, yeah, whatever you want me to do, I'll do it. And she tells him, and he does it without asking. And people are kind of like, that's weird. He should be the Prince Charming, show it. But I actually thought, no, I think you could read this as Disney trying to literalize the symbolic thing that happens in a fairy tale. So in a fairy tale, there's this symbolic moment of love at first sight, which if you transport that into the real world, what it looks like is, getting to know each other and falling in love over time, et cetera, et cetera. So I think, there's a version of what Disney is doing that would be good, which is trying to show in real terms what that symbolic thing really is. And I kind of thought that was sort of happening for Anna and Kristoff in this movie, because, you know, Kristoff has this line, "My love is not fragile," which means sort of like, you know, you're going off and doing your thing, but I'm still here. I'll still be here for you when you realize that you actually do need to be part of a team. And here I am. And I think that that's really real. And I think, you know, I think if she said, you know, "No, I'm going to live with my sister and visit you on weekends," I think he would say, "No, that's not really what I'm asking." But, you know, if she's going to marry him and they're going to start a life together, but she needs to go off and do something for a minute, he can be there and he can wait, and he shows up and he says, "Yeah, what do you need? I'm here for you. You know, what do you need?" And it's not weak to do that. You know, in real life, it's not weak for the man to say, "Oh, you're in trouble? What do you need? I'll help you." That's strength, right? To put aside whatever your problem is. I mean, he's having this existential crisis of like, how do I propose to my girlfriend? You know, and she's like, "Actually, I'm trying to get these rock giants to wake up." You know, and he's like, "Oh, that's important. I'll help you," and put aside my weird problem with proposing. Yeah. You know, and I think that's really great. And I think if Disney could do that, if they could sort of show that, like, in real life, love is complicated, but there is underlying truth to the idea of true love, and this is what it's like, I think that would be great.
Okay, thank you. Oh, give me 1 sec here with Demos.
Okay.
I'm just seeing arms flail in their portal on Google. That's fascinating.
What happened?
I was just seeing the sun's arm flying around on Google.
Oh yeah. Well.
Oh yeah. Sorry. Yeah. My kids and I have this running joke where he steals my tea. They always steal my tea, and I have. Of course, he's drinking it all right now.
I do this,
and then he's laughing about it.
My kids in bed.
I will say, speaking to what like they said about Kristoff, like literally saying stuff that literally happens in real life, and that's kind of exactly how like marriage works. Anna tells him what she needs. She doesn't play behind these games,
right?
Because I still like some of the games, and it's like, I want you to do something, but I don't want to tell you what it is that I want you to do. In my mind today. And that's moments where my husband's like, "Yeah, there's a reason that you're not a bestseller." And he'll laugh at me for like, "I can't read your mind the way you can read my mind." And it's like, I know, but it's just fun. And so, but I was like, "Yeah, I need to like get the rock giants to take down the dam." I'm like, good for you being like honest about what you need.
Yeah, I mean, that makes no sense. You probably shouldn't do that, but okay, whatever. If that's what you need to tell me about, that's fine. Yeah. I think, you know, I'm always sort of saying, like, you know, Prince Charming exists in real life. He just doesn't look like Prince Charming in a fairy tale. But the Prince Charming from the fairy tale can inform you about what your person is supposed to be like. So even if the person that you fall in love with is not handsome, is not particularly charming, is not particularly, you know, strong or powerful, or doesn't wield a sword or ride a horse, you know, there are underlying characteristics that all of those things represent that you do want in your partner. You know, he doesn't have to be charming in the sense that he can be sort of socially inept, but you do want him to treat you well. You want him to understand your worth and to not abuse you. You know, he may not be able to like punch someone in the face, but you do want him to protect you. You know, you want him to walk on the street side of the sidewalk, and you want him to stand up for you if somebody starts saying something nasty to you, etc. So those symbolic things are real things that you can find in your life, and fairy tales help us with that. They help us to figure that stuff out. And I think, you know, I actually think that one problem with the current iteration of feminism, whatever wave we're in, is this literalization of everything to the point where we've forgotten what the underlying values of things are supposed to be. You know, and I think, you know, we see it in like hookup culture, for example, where, you know, it's become so literal, like my body has needs. and the needs are important in and of themselves, and therefore I am going to fulfill my body's desires without any kind of underlying merit at all. So, people just sort of sleep around because they think that the actual desire that they feel is somehow an end and in and of itself.
Yeah.
And we've forgotten how to read between the lines. We've forgotten symbolism, and I think that's really a problem for us as a culture.
Yeah, and I think that translates very well, like with Marxism and with the kind of like ignorance that it kind of brings. Like it's almost like your whole life you have the past and the present and the future, and you don't just have one side of things. And that plays into like kind of like the rule of threes, where there's this magic thing that happens with, like I talked earlier about family being like the first cornerstone of your identity. So you have family to teach you like where you come from and like kind of help grow you, and then you have community. You have so like you have your community, you have things that you experience and you participate in, and then at the end of that, you have more of you come out of it as an individual that wants to produce something, like to make your own, to like almost like manifest your own person in what you do and what you say and what you create. And it's like, I love that feeling as a writer, and I think today, like the consumer culture, understanding like creative destruction equals profit for some people. Like, I talk about how like like the health industry like couldn't survive without fat people who are insecure. It's it's the same thing with like divorce lawyers. If there was just no more divorce, they'd be out of jobs. and it's just it's really kind of tragic how like the paper and that money's printed on, or the plastic paper that money's printed on, has become the object and the end, instead of using it to push kind of like the non-physical elements of who you are and who society is and stuff like that. And I think we're seeing a lot of that kind of creative destruction in its vast wilderness of responses to that in the fracturing of the culture today in America, anyway. So, and to some degree worldwide, I saw Mexit was trending. So what do you think, Tyler?
I've been a good male feminist boy the entire time. I was letting you guys talk. kind of hard to kind of word in edgewise, honestly.
Sorry about the siren. I don't know if you guys can hear that.
Oh, I heard it.
Welcome to New York.
But yeah, I don't know where to begin. I mean, we were talking earlier about what the underlying politics of what the movie seems to be saying on the margins were, and I had a point in there. My read on it was that there was some kind of level of questioning as to like the idea of, it was kind of propagating the idea of national legitimacy being a lie, if that makes sense, because there's the whole idea of Elsa's entire worldview being the foundation of a society that's lied about its origins from the get-go prior to her birth. It seems like it was trying to say something a little more radical there, even if it didn't quite come into a head. Although the idea of Anna just being willing to, like, yeah, we're gonna destroy the dam and possibly let our entire kingdom be washed away as penance for the sins of our society, and then nature decides at the last minute to be like, no, we'll forgive you. I kind of read the radicalism into that, at the very least, because I mean, I'm glad that the movie is being more traditional at its face, but I think in some of the details there, you can kind of see where the more radical people working at Disney were trying to sneak their ideas on the side.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I mean, I think that what they were trying to do was to paint a picture of a kind of native I mean, they aren't Native Americans because they're in Norway. They are
indigenous peoples, perhaps.
Right, indigenous peoples who, and the Europeans came and they pretended to be nice, but then they were really mean and they did something horrible that caused the indigenous peoples to not be able to thrive and allowed the European people to thrive more, and then their whole society was built on the fact that this happened, and and Elsa and Anna discover this, and they sort of realize like, oh, we need to make amends for the horrible actions of our predecessors, and so we're going to completely destroy our society in order to say sorry, which is sort of ridiculous, and people talk a lot about with this movie, people have mentioned sort of reparations as a concept that the movie is kind of trying to convey. But to me, it was sort of like, it's also silly because at the end, it's like, they do knock down the dam, but then Elsa, who is in fact still the queen, stops that. So it's sort of like, okay, what? Like, are you doing it? Are you not doing it? Or what is actually happening here? Like, what are you saying? Because I just felt like, I don't know why this is happening, and it didn't hang together for me, so I just sort of dismissed it. But I think you definitely could sort of say, like, that there is definitely a radical element there of a sort of progressive agenda coming through. But I wrote it off because I just felt like it was so ridiculous.
She's like she's the fifth element. She was chosen by nature to make the decision for us.
Right.
So I'm guessing there you can kind of read in between the lines as to what that's supposed to mean. Like, I guess I noted that maybe she's like the opposite of Thanos in that situation, where it's being like, oh, maybe killing everyone off to stop global warming is a bad idea, but.
I had students, like when I was teaching college level classes, I had students suggest that. It was ridiculous. Like, oh yeah, let's just kill everyone, stop climate change. Yeah.
The funny thing is that they got the people out of Arendelle. So also people were on the cliff top and they weren't going to die. So it's like, in order to make amends for this, we're just going to trash our castle. Okay? Like, we're just going to like make water come and flood our town and our castle. But all the people are going to be just fine, and we're going to probably rebuild, and it's going to be great. So it was all sort of just like a token message anyway. I mean, she's going around like waking up the giants to knock down the dam, but like it's not going to hurt anybody. You're just going to make a big mess that someone's going to have to clean up, But so I just felt like, what?
I actually so I grew up near Johnstown, Pennsylvania, where they had the Johnstown flood. We actually have like the museum, and it was part of our thing. And so I have like the part of my own like history is built around this idea of rebuilding. And I think like all the people were out. So it was a very personal thing to Anna about, my sister gave her life for this, the least they could do is fulfill it, and and then the troll's little prophecy thing about like there's no future for Arendelle unless you figure this out, and we figured it out, so like it turns out like there's no future anyway, maybe. And I kind of actually Faith edited my novel for this, which is Northern Lights, Southern Stars, about there's this like
read it, everybody.
Yes, go read it. My narrator for my audiobook is almost done, and she is amazing. Oh my gosh. So like part of this idea of like colonialism, or like even with America and the Native American story, like I think it's an issue that like you really only have a future like going forward together, and part of that is acknowledging the wrongs, trying to fix them, but there also is like this element of forgiveness, and I felt like I feel like that's the kind of thing most people forget, is like the how does it go, the relationships don't thrive because the guilty are punished, but because the innocent are merciful. And I thought that was more of the kind of the paradox of justice and mercy. It's, we're going to fix it, and then we're going to save it. we're going to save the good, and we're going to make it better. So that wasn't really like an issue for me because of that. If it had been destroyed, I would have been like, well, they'll rebuild it together and it'll be better than before. I mean, and Anna and Elsa's parents, I think, are also kind of like symbolic of this, because they were like, she was from the Northuldra and he was from Arendelle, and their love kind of created that sanctuary to begin with. And so it wasn't as big of a deal for me because and maybe it's just because I grew up in a pretty white area, and now I don't live in a white area. Yeah. But like, nobody here in the South really cares about racism. I mean, there are pockets of it, like individually in places, but my kids are the white kids at their schools. And I just think that it's actually a really good kind of more conservative, like historically backed up message to say there's judgment, but there also needs to be mercy. And I don't think there's a white person alive that if they apologize to a black person, they would be okay with that if forgiveness was some kind of final thing. Like, people bring this up all the time, and it's just it's not going to be resolved until you forgive us. But there are a lot of people like I don't think that's what they're looking for. I think more people are saying this stuff for like power grabs and cynical kind of playing to your base type of stuff. And that's where I'm like, yeah, they can use this, and they can do a pretty good job of it. Another movie that did this really well was Zootopia. So talking about how the change begins with the individual, and that's actually a very conservative message. But if like there was like this big thing of, oh, Disney's so progressive, and I'm like laughing, and I'm like, no, they're not.
I think the problem with the setup of what happens in Frozen 2 is that there's only one person who does the bad action and nobody else knows about it. So the grandfather or the great-grandfather or whoever he is tricks everybody, tricks the indigenous peoples, but also he tricks all of his people, right, into thinking that this dam is going to be good for everybody, but it really cuts off the indigenous people and it helps the Arendelle people, but he's the only one that knows that. So it's not like a societal problem. Like, it's not like, oh, this is a society that has screwed over these poor indigenous people, and therefore we need to make amends for that. It's kind of like, no, there was this one bad guy, and he made a bad action, and nobody else even knew about the consequences of his actions until this moment. So it's kind of like that we need to like totally destroy our entire kingdom and knock down this dam and do everything that they're trying to do because, of something that they had no idea even had occurred, before this, is a little silly. I mean, I agree though that like, if that's what they're doing, they should have done it. They should have knocked down Arendelle. Like if that's what they're going to do, they should have, all the people were safe. They should have taken it. And, it could have also been, this was the place where Elsa was kind of locked away, and it was the place where she was forced to hide these powers, and where she was so sad and didn't really know who she was or how to reconcile the fact that she had these powers with the fact that she didn't want to kill everyone, and to tear it down and build it up again would be symbolic of her transformation and her embracing her powers. And I did kind of feel like when the water didn't take over the kingdom, I was kind of like, what? Like, what was the point of that? Like this whole sort of big thing. Wake up the giants and throw the something at the something, and then it's like, oh, I've got my water horse, we're good. It's fine.
Realistically, why don't you just do like a small, gradual takedown of the dam? I mean, like, the reason that there's a dam is because like it like stops the water somewhat.
And obviously, like, they weren't underwater, so obviously there's a way to have this water exist without a dam and without killing everyone, or without knocking down the kingdom, because like it wasn't like their kingdom was underwater before they built this dam. So obviously there's a way for this water to exist and for everything else to exist as well. So I don't know. It was just nonsensical.
Maybe that's kind of like emblematic of like the problem in general is kind of pull one side versus the other. Like there's actually like a lot of nuance in between. And like same thing with like the literalism and the symbolism. There is a lot of like exchange and halfway, a lot of like kind of like complementary kind of things that go together and go really well together. But people like need to be able to recognize them to kind of get it. So
I can only imagine how much the tone of the movie would have changed, though, if they hadn't evacuated the city and Anna just went down like, "We have to destroy the dam now!" But
right, and everybody dies. Yeah, that would be a different movie for sure.
That would literally just be Infinity War. That Anna would just literally be Thanos at that point, being like, "We have to rebuild her. We have to achieve some sort of retribution. But everyone will die." But yeah, do you guys want to have any other points you want to talk about before we kind of start wrapping up? We've been going for like an hour and a half, and I'm kind of starting to slur.
Yeah, I'm good. I should go to bed. I think it's late at night for me.
The sad part is it's only 8:30 here, and I've only had half a glass of alcohol, and I can't speak. So.
Well, I was gonna say you shouldn't be drinking on the job, Tyler. I'm not that bad.
Day drinking is a proud pastime. No. But yeah, thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much for both. I appreciate you both coming on together, and you guys. Listening to you guys talk was a lot of fun. So
it was a pleasure. Thanks for having us on.
Sure thing. Have a good night, everyone.
Bye.